In this free plugin overview, we're going to go over Xfer Records' popular multiband compressor, the OTT plugin. What's up everyone, it's Daniel here from SoundShock Audio. If this is your first time here and you want to get more in-depth, free plugin overviews, expert production tutorials, interviews with music industry professionals, and exclusive free sample packs, then hit the subscribe button and the bell notification next to it so you get notified every time I release a new video. So now we're going to go over the Xfer Records OTT plugin. The OTT plugin is a specific setting on a multiband compressor that takes any sound that you run it through and gives it a more aggressive and in-your-face sound. So the plugin itself isn't necessarily a new type of compression. It is just a particular setting on a multiband compressor. To understand how this OTT effect is created by the multiband compressor, you will first need to understand the two types of compression, downward and upward compression. When we use the term compression, we're typically talking about lowering the level of signals that exceed a threshold. This is the most common form of compression that we all use and is called downward compression because it pushes loud signals down, which reduces your dynamic range or difference between the loudest and quietest parts of your sound. The second type of compression that is used less often is upward compression. This type of compression reduces the dynamic range as well by raising the levels of a signal that are below a threshold. Now, if all this talk about dynamic range and compression is a bit confusing to you, I highly recommend you check out the tutorials that I created on compression and multiband compression, as these will give you a much better understanding of dynamics and how compression really works. Now, the main part of the OTT plugin is the upward compression, and it is applying up to a 36 decibel boost to your signal that is below the negative 40 decibel threshold on the higher frequencies of your sound. In addition to this upward compression, it is also doing the standard downward compression to help iron out your sound, which reduces your signal that is above a certain threshold in the mids, highs, and lows. Now, if you guys want to download this plugin, there is a link in the description below. So now let's go over the controls of the OTT plugin and hear what this multiband effect sounds like. And to show you what these controls do, we're going to apply the OTT to our synth sample here. Let's have a listen to it. So now we're going to apply the OTT effect, and we'll first start by talking about the depth control. And this is simply the dry-wet control for the OTT plugin. So let's go ahead and turn the depth knob up to hear what the OTT sounds like. So you can hear the sound is more aggressive and upfront, and some of the frequencies are also being compressed. So that upwards and downwards compression is being activated. Next is the time control, and this controls the attack and the release time of the OTT. So if you have a lower time control, then the attack and release will be quicker, and a higher time will set the attack and release to longer times. So usually if you want the effect to be more prominent, you would want to go ahead and turn the time down so the attack is lower and it lets less of the original signal pass through the OTT. Next is the input and output gain. The input gain controls the volume of the uncompressed signal going into the OTT, while the output gain controls the output gain of the compressed signal coming out of the OTT. So now let's go over the metering of this plugin. If we look to the left-hand side of the OTT, we can see three numbers here, and the top numbers here represent the high frequency band, and the middle numbers represent the mid frequencies, and the bottom numbers represent the low frequencies here. So you can see a mixture of positive and negative numbers here. If we look at the high band, we can see positive numbers, and these positive numbers mean that upward compression is happening, and the negative numbers mean downward compression is happening. As once again, upward compression raises the volume of a signal below the threshold and downward compression reduces the volume of a signal above a threshold. And if we look to the right of these numbers, you'll notice the little blue bars going up and down with yellow dots. These are the levels of your compressed and uncompressed signals. The blue bars are the level of the signal after the OTT is applied, and the yellow dot is the level of the signal before the OTT is applied. So if the yellow dot is higher than the blue bar, that means downward compression is being applied, and if the blue bar is higher than the yellow dot, upward compression is being applied. So here, upward compression is being applied to the high frequencies, and downward compression is being applied to the mid and low frequencies. And next, we have our brown and green bars here that are in the middle of the plugin. These bars are the threshold for the specific frequency ranges. By dragging the little black bar in the middle here and dragging it to the right towards the green bar, you will increase the amount of upward compression. And if you pull more to the brown, you will have more downward compression. So let's hear this in action. So you can hear as we moved it farther right, the high frequencies were becoming more aggressive and more present because the upward compression or raising of the volume below the threshold was being raised. And as we moved it more to the left, more downward compression was being applied, meaning more frequencies were attenuated above the threshold. The next controls that we're going to go over are the high, mid, and low knobs to the right of the plugin here. And these knobs are essentially the makeup gain for the high, low, and mid frequencies. And then finally, we have the upward and downward percentage controls. And these upward and downward percentage controls act as the ratios for the compressor, or how strong the compression will be. So to hear more of what these upward and downward controls do, we'll go ahead and adjust them. We'll start with the upward control here, and we'll go ahead and put the threshold all the way up, so there's more upward compression being applied. Then we'll go ahead and turn the knob down and up to 0% and 200% so you can hear what this upward ratio or percentage is doing. So you can hear as we turn the upward percentage down, the upwards compression is being reduced, and we turn it up, more upwards compression is being applied. Now let's do the same with the downward percentage or ratio. We'll go ahead and move the black bar all the way down, so the most amount of downward compression is being applied. And let's go ahead and turn the downward percentage to 0 and to 200. So you'll notice as we turn the downward percentage down to 0% that the signal gets louder. So again, we're having the most amount of downward compression being applied because the threshold is down the farthest for the high frequency band. And as we turn down the downward percentage, the ratio is being reduced, meaning the strength of the compressor is also being reduced. So the volume reduction that is happening with this downwards compression becomes weaker and weaker. And as we turn the downward percentage up, and the signal becomes quieter because more gain reduction is happening. So now that we have a solid understanding of how the over-the-top compression works, we're going to go ahead and apply it to 3 different types of sounds: a single sound, a group of sounds, and an entire track. So the first sound that we're going to apply this to is our bass sound. Let's have a listen to our bass. So we want this bass to be more aggressive and upfront and really drive our track, so the over-the-top compression is the perfect tool to do this. So you can hear that the mid-range and the high frequencies of this bass sound are a little dull, and we want to bring them out in the mix. So I'll go ahead and turn the depth knob all the way to 100%, and then adjust the rest of the controls so we can hear the effect of what the parameter changes are doing, and then we'll readjust the depth to have it mix in nicely with this bass sound. So let's go ahead and adjust the thresholds first. So we added a little more high end and a little more mid range with a little more upward compression in those frequency ranges. Now let's adjust the ratio of the upward and downward compression here. So we don't want the upward compression to be too brittle and too harsh. So we turned down the strength of the upward compression, and then we raised the downward compression, the strength of the downward compression, to make sure the sound was under control and no frequencies would poke out in the mix. So now let's go ahead and adjust the time percentage, or the attack and the release times. And we'll want the OTT plugin to kick in immediately. So we'll go ahead and turn down the time a little bit here. You can hear as we raise the time that the over-the-top compression wasn't as noticeable as the attack time was raised and the release time was raised. And this lets more of the unprocessed signal through. So at around 65% sounded good here. And finally, let's adjust the depth percentage, or the dry wet. Without the OTT. Now with. You can hear it's much more aggressive. The high end is brought out a lot more, and it'll fit in nicer with our track here. And the next source that we're going to apply the OTT plugin to is our drums. So the OTT not only works on individual sounds, but it works on groups of sounds as well. And drums are a great element to put the OTT on, especially in electronic music, as we want the drums to be present and aggressive and really drive our track. So go ahead and do the same process here. We'll go ahead and adjust the threshold, the ratios, the time, and the depth. So let's first have a listen to our drums without the OTT. So definitely more punch, more sizzle can be added to these. So let's turn the dry, wet, or depth to 100% and then adjust everything. And now the ratios. And now the time. And now the dry wet. Without the OTT. Now with. much more lively, much more upfront, and much more impactful for your track with the OTT plugin on. Finally, we can apply the OTT plugin to our entire song, as this helps to bring out the smaller details in our song and give our track a little bit of a drive. Now, when we place the over-the-top compression on our entire song, we'll want to apply it very subtly, as this is quite an extreme effect, and it can be very easy to overdo the amount of OTT that we're using on the track and completely destroy the dynamics of our track. So we're just looking for subtle changes here, nothing major, just to give it that extra drive and presence. So we'll go ahead and adjust all the bands here, the thresholds, and then the ratios, the upward and downward percentages, the time, and then the depth here. Let's first have a listen to the track so we can listen for what we want to add to this with the over-the-top compression. So I feel this track needs a little more mid-range, and the highs could be tamed just a little bit. So let's go ahead and adjust our parameters to reflect what we want our track to sound like. So without the OTT, and with, so you can hear we added in that mid-range a little bit, gave it a little more aggression, tamed the high frequencies a little bit while still making them present, all with it only at 11% dry wet here. Now, one final disclaimer for the OTT plugin: upwards and downwards compression does reduce the dynamic range of your track, which again is the difference between the quieter and louder parts of your mix, and overusing this effect on your entire track, groups of sounds, and individual sounds can easily destroy the dynamic range and make your track sound flat. So when applying this effect to your sounds, make sure you use some restraint and don't over apply it, because again, the dynamics of your track can easily be destroyed. So I want to thank you all for sticking around to the end of this video. I hope that the explanation of the upwards and downwards compression has helped you understand just how awesome of an effect this OTT is and how it can be applied to really any sound or groups of sounds or your entire track. And again, a link to the plugin is in the description of this video. And if you guys like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and click the subscribe button for more free plugin reviews, free sample packs, interviews with industry professionals, and in-depth tutorials. And before I let you guys go, I just want to bring your attention to the SoundShock audio website, which is the #1 resource on the web for music producers, as it has the largest collection of free downloads on the web, which include samples and loops, DAW templates, music production apps, MIDI, contact instruments, presets, and of course, more plugins. So head on over to soundshockaudio.com and grab all these professional resources for free. And if you guys have any questions at all about this video on compression, or really anything music production related at all, go ahead and comment on this video or shoot me an email at daniel@soundshockaudio.com, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. Until next time, everyone, Daniel from SoundShock Audio out.